were never too sensitive. You were simply too awake in a world that preferred you asleep. The people who hurt you rarely shout. They do not slam doors. They do not leave obvious scars. Instead, they make you feel invisible. They make you question your worth without raising their voice. You walk out of rooms carrying a silence that is not yours, shoulders tense, jaw tight, and a thought whispering, maybe it is me. Carl Jung saw this clearly long before psychology had words for it. He understood that those who avoid their own shadow wound others quietly, through dismissal, omission, withdrawal, and worse. If you do not know your own patterns, you will keep inviting this pain. You will believe you are unlucky, unworthy, too emotional. But what if every person who hurt you was not a reflection of your value, but of what you were taught to tolerate? Jung did not only offer theory. He left warnings. And hidden inside every heartbreak are truths we rarely name. If you do not know these truths, people will continue to harm you without guilt. Because once pain becomes familiar, it becomes invisible. So let us begin. The first truth: if you do not define your value, others will discount it. Every time you stay silent when you should speak, every time you sacrifice your needs to avoid conflict, every time you protect someone else's comfort above your truth, you create a world where your worth is negotiable. The second truth: those who benefit from your silence will always call your truth selfish. The moment you begin to name your needs, backlash arrives. They will say you have changed, that you are difficult, that you are not the same. But it is not your truth they fear. It is their loss of control. The third truth: your shadow is not evil. It is unexpressed power. The anger you suppress. The fire in your gut when you are disrespected. That is not a flaw. It is sacred protection. Your shadow does not seek to destroy you. It seeks to defend you. The fourth truth: people do not hear what you say, they respond to what you tolerate. You can declare, "Do not speak to me that way." But if you remain when they do it again, your energy rewrites your words. Boundaries without action are only noise. The fifth truth: every apology you make for being hurt teaches you to erase yourself. How many times have you said, "Sorry, I'm just tired. Sorry if I overreacted"? Jung would ask, why do you apologize for your pain? What part of you was trained to believe your feelings were a burden? The sixth truth: trauma teaches you to seek love in the shape of your survival. If survival meant pleasing, adapting, shrinking, then that is the version of love you chase. But that is not love. It is familiar pain dressed as affection. The seventh truth: if love requires you to betray yourself, it is not love. It is a transaction, a deal disguised as devotion. And every time you say yes to what breaks you, you lose. The eighth truth: the mask you wear to be loved becomes your cage. The agreeable persona, the easygoing smile, the reputation of being always available. It works until you forget who you are underneath. The ninth truth: emotional labor without reciprocity is exploitation. You comfort, you explain, you absorb damage, and they call it love. But love that only flows one way is not devotion. It is depletion. The 10th truth: you teach people how to treat you by what you allow twice. The first time can be a mistake, but if it happens again, your silence gives permission. The 11th truth: not everyone who understands you deserves access to you. Even broken people can mirror your pain. Insight without integrity is manipulation. Just because someone sees your soul does not mean they should hold it. The 12th truth: you are not too sensitive. You are finally listening to your nervous system. That knot in your stomach, that energy crash after a call, that urge to withdraw. It is not weakness. It is your body whispering truth. The 13th truth: loyalty to dysfunction is not virtue. It is fear. Fear of loss. Fear of change. Fear of being alone. But staying in pain does not make you loyal. It makes you lost. The 14th truth: if someone only loves you when you are easy to love, it is not love. It is consumption. The moment you disagree, say no, or fall ill, they withdraw. That is not rejection, it is revelation. The 15th truth: over-explaining is not logic. It is a trauma response. The need to justify, defend, or clarify what should be obvious is not about them. It is about your fear that clarity makes you unlovable. And here is a story. There was a girl, quiet and soft-spoken. She made herself small in every room. The peacekeeper, the agreeable one. She laughed at jokes that hurt. She let interruptions pass without protest. Until one day, when a conversation turned hostile, she did not laugh. She did not explain. She simply said, "Do not speak to me that way." And then she left. Her legs shook. Her chest tightened. But she walked away because she realized something. Being understood is not the same as being safe. Jung believed each of us must face a symbolic death, the death of the false self. That girl buried the version of herself who believed endurance was love, and what rose in her place was someone uninterested in being palatable. So let me ask you, when did you first learn that silence was safer than truth? Was it a parent's tone, a teacher's glare, a friend who disappeared when you cried too much? That was the moment your real voice went into hiding. And from that day forward, people could hurt you because the part of you that should scream had been sedated. But it is not too late. These truths are not here to make you bitter. They are here to wake you up, because clarity is confrontation. And once you stop shrinking, once you stop apologizing for your depth, the world will say you are difficult. Not because you changed into someone cruel, but because you became clear. Healing will make you unrecognizable to people who only knew you broken. They will say you have changed, and they are right. But what they truly mean is you are no longer easy to exploit. If your love is not allowed to evolve, it will expire. Relationships do not collapse from disagreement. They collapse when one person grows and the other refuses to adapt. Love that never changes quietly rots. People fear your boundaries when they benefited from your lack of them. They will call you cold, guarded, harsh. But that is only projection. What they are really saying is, your self-respect now limits my control. When you stop over-explaining, manipulators lose their grip. They thrive on confusion, endless dialogues that drain your energy. But once your truth becomes non-negotiable, they fall silent. Because clarity is no longer a conversation. It is a wall. Empathy is only a gift when it is protected by discernment. Without boundaries, your compassion becomes currency in someone else's game. You end up feeling their pain more than your own. But love without discernment is not devotion. It is self-erasure. The desire to be understood can make you tolerate the intolerable. You explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. But the problem is not your clarity. It is their comfort. When someone crosses your boundary and then becomes offended, you have revealed their entitlement. Healthy people adjust when you express a need. Unhealthy ones retaliate. Not because your boundary is wrong, but because they never planned to honor it. You are not responsible for the emotional reactions of those you have outgrown. Guilt will whisper, "Be softer, be nicer." But growth is not cruelty. It is clarity. If your evolution wounds them, it is not your job to shrink to their limits. People do not leave when you become toxic. They leave when you become self-respecting. Watch closely. The moment you start standing up for yourself, people vanish. Not because you are wrong, but because you are no longer easy. Your triggers are not flaws. They are messengers. Carl Jung would ask, what memory just got touched? Your emotions are not defects. They are information. Projection is when someone accuses you of what they cannot face within themselves. They say you are manipulative when you set a boundary. They say you are selfish when you ask for space. But often what they see in you is what they refuse to confront in their own reflection. Some people are addicted to your dysfunction because it validates theirs. You are easy to be around when you are anxious, when you doubt yourself, when you overgive. But the moment you heal, they feel exposed. Because your clarity makes their chaos impossible to ignore. When someone withdraws love as punishment, it was never love. It was leverage. You know the feeling. The cold shoulder after you said no. The silence when you stood your ground. That was not love retreating. That was control collapsing. You do not have to explain your boundary. You only need to enforce it. They will push, they will demand reasons, they will debate. But your boundary is not a courtroom. It is a door. Closed, locked, final. You do not owe anyone continued access to the version of you they felt entitled to. You have grown. You have changed. You no longer laugh at the same jokes. You no longer chase like you used to. That is not rudeness. That is revolution. Jung understood something rarely said directly. Every soul has a gravitational pull, a psychological orbit that attracts situations equal to its self-concept. If your inner belief is, I must be easy to love, you will seek people who demand difficulty to feel impressed. If your mantra is, I do not deserve too much, you will settle for those who give just enough to keep you doubting. The universe does not give you what you want. It mirrors who you believe you are. So pause and ask yourself, what story am I still carrying that shapes the love I accept? What belief am I still feeding that keeps me in orbit around dysfunction? What identity do I need to release to step into self-respect? Carl Jung once wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That privilege begins when you realize boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are doors that teach you who is worthy to come in. Confusion is the favorite weapon of those who fear your clarity. They do not attack you directly. They distort the picture. They twist your words. They flood you with contradictions until you no longer trust your own perception. This is not an accident. It is strategy. Because once you doubt your vision, you will surrender your voice. You will start to rely on their version of events instead of your own. And that is how control begins. Projection is one of the oldest tricks in human psychology. A person refuses to face their own flaws, so they hang them on you. They call you selfish because they cannot admit their own greed. They call you manipulative because they cannot face their own deceit. They accuse you of abandoning them because they never learned how to stay with themselves. Carl Jung named projection for what it is, a refusal to meet one's own shadow. He wrote, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But instead of using irritation as a mirror, people use it as a shield. They throw their discomfort at you so they do not have to hold it. And if you are not awake, you will carry it for them. You will absorb guilt that was never yours. You will defend yourself against accusations that were never about you. You will apologize for wounds you did not create. Until one day you realize you are living in someone else's story. Confusion has symptoms. Notice them. When a conversation leaves you drained but not enlightened. When you walk away doubting yourself instead of feeling heard. When you replay words for hours trying to decode their meaning. That is not intimacy. That is interference. Healthy love brings clarity even in conflict. Unhealthy dynamics thrive on chaos. Because as long as you are spinning in circles, you are not standing in truth. So how do you step out of this web? The first step is to trust your body before their words. If your stomach knots, if your chest tightens, if your energy collapses after they speak, believe it. The nervous system does not lie. What your body knows instantly, your mind will try to rationalize for years. The second step is to refuse the invitation to debate your reality. Manipulators thrive when you defend yourself endlessly. They want you exhausted, tangled, confused. But truth does not need debate. It only needs declaration. You do not need to prove your boundary. You only need to hold it. The third step is to recognize that not every story deserves your participation. When someone builds a narrative where you are always at fault, step out of the script. Do not waste your life auditioning for a role that only exists to justify their denial. And here is where it becomes powerful. Once you stop carrying projections that were never yours, you begin to see clearly. The fog lifts. You recognize what was always manipulation. And with that clarity comes grief. because you see how long you lived inside someone else's shadow play. But grief is not weakness. It is cleansing. It is the burning away of illusion. It is the weight leaving your chest as you realize, I was never the villain in their story, I was the mirror they could not bear. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. When your presence reveals illusions, do not expect applause. Expect resistance. Expect withdrawal. Expect anger. Because truth threatens the walls they built to survive. And yet this is your work, not to force others to see, but to refuse to carry what is not yours, to let their projections fall to the ground where they belong, and to step out of the fog into your own clarity. Confusion loses its power the moment you choose presence over persuasion. Projection loses its grip the moment you stop defending and start discerning. Chaos dissolves the moment you anchor yourself in silence instead of explanation. Because the truth is simple. You were never too much. You were never the villain. You were never broken for needing boundaries. What you were was clear. And clarity is always dangerous to those who depend on your confusion. So remember this. If their love feels like chaos, it is not love. If their presence erases your clarity, it is not intimacy. If their words make you question your worth, it is not truth. It is manipulation wrapped in affection. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The fog cannot return once the light has entered. And the more you honor your own clarity, the more the chaos of others begins to sound like static instead of song. There comes a moment when you realize you cannot go back. The mask you wore is cracked. The silence you carried is heavy, and the illusion that endurance equals love has collapsed. This is the beginning of reconstruction, the raw stage where you no longer fit into the old life, but the new one has not fully formed. It is disorienting, it is lonely, but it is also the most honest ground you will ever stand on. Carl Jung once said, I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. This is the foundation of rebuilding. You are not your past betrayals. You are not the silence that once swallowed your voice. You are the choice you make now. The first step is acknowledging the shadow without fear. The shadow is not your enemy. It is the container of everything you buried to survive. Your anger, your grief, your hunger for truth, your need for freedom. All of these were labeled dangerous once, so you hid them away. But what was repressed is not gone. It waits for you. The second step is integration. To stop running from the shadow and invite it to the table. To look at your anger and say, you are not my shame. You are my guardrail. To look at your grief and say, you are not my weakness. You are my proof of love. To look at your fear and say, you are not my cage. You are my compass. Healing does not mean deleting these parts. It means giving them rightful place in your identity. What was once chaos becomes power when honored instead of denied. The third step is rebuilding boundaries as the architecture of self-respect. Your boundary is not a wall of isolation. It is a frame that holds your life in integrity. Without boundaries, you are a scattered sketch. With boundaries, you are a masterpiece in progress. And here is the paradox. When you first begin to set boundaries, they feel violent. They feel harsh. They feel unnatural, because you have been conditioned to equate self-respect with cruelty. But slowly you learn that a clear no creates more peace than a forced yes ever could. The fourth step is grief. Yes, grief, because healing is not only about what you gain, it is also about what you lose. You lose illusions. You lose relationships that fed on your silence. You lose versions of yourself that once protected you but now suffocate you. Grief is the bridge between who you were and who you are becoming. Nietzsche once said, one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. Grief is that chaos. It is the storm before the clarity. And though it feels endless, it clears the sky for what comes next. The fifth step is identity reclamation. Rebuilding is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you were before fear trained you to shrink. It is about dusting off the parts of you that always existed but were silenced. The child who dreamed loudly, the teenager who felt deeply, the adult who still longs for honesty more than approval. This reclamation is not loud. It is quiet. It happens in choices, in the way you say no without guilt, in the way you walk away without apology, in the way you choose silence as presence instead of silence as suppression. And as you practice, you begin to notice something. The chaos of others no longer dictates your peace. The projections no longer stick. The manipulation no longer lands. Because you are no longer fractured. You are whole. Carl Jung also said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Reconstruction is that acceptance. It is terrifying because it means no more excuses, no more hiding behind the wounds, no more blaming others for the silence you continue to keep. It is the radical act of choosing yourself fully. And once you taste it, you cannot return to the old life. You cannot pretend you do not know. You cannot silence a voice that has learned to roar. And you cannot forget the weight that lifted the first time you chose truth over tolerance. This is the work of rebuilding. Not perfect, not painless, but sacred. Because each time you choose clarity over confusion, you lay another brick in the foundation of your real life. And slowly, steadily, that life begins to rise. True peace is not a life without conflict. It is the ability to remain steady when conflict arrives. It is not the absence of discomfort. It is the mastery of self within discomfort. The person who has rebuilt themselves cannot be controlled the way they once were. They are no longer dependent on approval. They no longer measure their worth by how easy they are to love. They no longer trade their truth for someone else's comfort. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This is what sovereignty means. To live in alignment with your essence, not with others' expectations. To belong to yourself before belonging to anyone else. To live with a spine instead of a mask. Wholeness is not perfection. It is integration. It is the union of your shadow and your light, your anger and your love, your grief and your joy. You do not need to erase the contradictions within you. You need to allow them to coexist without shame. When you are whole, manipulation loses its grip. Projection falls flat. Confusion evaporates. Because you are anchored in your own clarity. You no longer need to explain yourself to be valid. You no longer need to fight for a seat at tables that do not honor you. You simply walk away. This is freedom. Not the freedom of chaos, but the freedom of self-respect. Not the freedom of escape, but the freedom of presence. Not the freedom of doing whatever you want, but the freedom of no longer betraying yourself. Nietzsche once wrote, "No price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." The cost of sovereignty is steep. You will lose approval. You will lose relationships built on your silence. You will lose the comfort of familiarity, but what you gain outweighs it all. You gain your voice. You gain your dignity. You gain the unshakable calm of a soul that no longer negotiates its worth. Wholeness does not make you untouchable. It makes you unafraid. It does not mean no one can wound you. It means no wound can erase you. It does not mean you never fall. It means you never abandon yourself when you do. Look closely at those who walk in sovereignty. Their peace is not loud. It is not about dominating others or proving superiority. It is a quiet presence that unsettles those still living in denial. Because nothing is more disruptive than a person who cannot be manipulated by guilt. This is why your wholeness will make others uncomfortable. Your calm will expose their chaos. Your clarity will highlight their confusion. Your boundaries will reveal their entitlement. And yet this is not cruelty. It is simply the reflection of a soul that refuses to shrink. Jung reminded us, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of the self, but by integration of the contraries. Your sovereignty is not about choosing light over dark. It is about holding both. Your freedom is not about erasing pain. It is about carrying it without being defined by it. And once you embody this, life changes. The noise of manipulation becomes background static. The weight of guilt dissolves. The fog of confusion lifts. And you begin to live not as an echo of others' desires, but as the full sound of your own truth. This is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of real living. Because sovereignty is not a destination. It is a daily practice. Every day you choose clarity over confusion. Every day you choose integrity over approval. Every day you choose presence over performance. And with each choice you build a life that cannot be stolen. Wholeness does not mean nothing hurts. It means nothing breaks you. It means every wound becomes wisdom. Every silence becomes strength. Every boundary becomes a bridge to peace. And that is the essence of freedom. Not a world without storms, but a self that remains unshaken within them. Not a life without loss, but a soul that refuses to lose itself again. Awareness without practice changes nothing. Insight without action becomes another form of avoidance. The truths you have uncovered are not meant to stay on a page. They are meant to be lived. Peace is not something you stumble upon by accident. It is the result of daily choices. It is the discipline of returning to yourself again and again, even when the world pulls at you with noise, pressure, and guilt. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." These truths are your tools for that work. They reveal the unconscious patterns that once kept you bound. And each time you practice them, you rewrite the script of your life. So what does practice look like? It looks like pausing before you answer and asking, is this truth or is this performance? It looks like noticing the knot in your stomach and trusting it instead of dismissing it. It looks like saying no without explaining because your boundary is valid without debate. It looks like resting without guilt because exhaustion is not a badge of worth. Practice is not dramatic. It is quiet repetition. It is the accumulation of small choices that rewire the nervous system. The silence you once carried as suppression now becomes silence as presence. The anger you once buried as shame now becomes anger as sacred protection. The grief you once feared now becomes grief as proof you have loved deeply. And yes, practice will cost you. It will cost you the relationships that depended on your silence. It will cost you the false peace that was built on your exhaustion. It will cost you the illusion that endurance was the same as love. But what it gives you is sovereignty. And sovereignty is priceless. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Your why is your clarity. Your why is your wholeness. Your why is the unshakable truth that you no longer negotiate your worth. The daily how will still include pain. There will still be rejection. There will still be grief. There will still be days when silence feels tempting again. But now you carry a why strong enough to hold you steady within the storm. Peace is not fragile. It does not shatter when people leave. It does not collapse when conflict arises. It does not vanish when discomfort returns. Peace that depends on circumstances is not peace. It is a bargain, and bargains always expire. The peace you are building is different. It is rooted in integration. It is built on boundaries. It is anchored in self-respect. It is not loud, but it is unshakable. When you embody this, your presence shifts. You no longer need to prove yourself in every room. You no longer chase those who misunderstand you. You no longer collapse when others disapprove, because peace has become your posture, not your prize. Jung also reminded us, wholeness is not about perfection, but about integration. Living in practice means no longer waiting to be flawless before you allow yourself peace. It means allowing contradiction without shame. It means carrying both grief and gratitude in the same body. It means living as a whole being, not as a performance of what others expect. And here is the quiet truth. When peace becomes your practice, others will feel it. Your calm will unsettle their chaos. Your boundaries will expose their entitlement. Your clarity will silence their manipulation. And though some will retreat, the ones who remain are those who can love you without conditions. So ask yourself each day, am I living from fear or from sovereignty? Am I silencing myself or speaking from truth? Am I shrinking for approval or standing in integrity? These are not abstract questions. They are the daily practice of peace. And when you live this way long enough, something extraordinary happens. You stop waiting for peace. You stop searching for freedom. You stop bargaining for love, because you realize you carry all of it within you. This is the power of peace, not as an idea, but as a practice, not as a destination, but as the daily rhythm of a life that no longer abandons itself.